fake money is being pumped into the system. Things seem to be going forward. And at some point in time, that bubble that's being created has to burst. And then everyone's going to be sad, frustrated, angry, concerned, probably wondering where their money is. You know, if you've ever had an experience where you've been sitting there and you're just like, feel like you got hit by a Mack truck and you're just dumbfounded because you're like, where did the money go? Where's my money? Hey, it's Richard Canfield here with Ascendant Financial and with the Wealth Without Bay Street podcast. I'm an authorized infinite banking practitioner in Canada. And today we're going to do a bit of a review video. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be listening to a short clip of Robert Kiyosaki. Now, if you're not familiar with Robert Kiyosaki, what rock have you been under? No, just kidding. But seriously, consider getting a couple of his books. One of my personal favorites is CASHFLOW QUADRANT. The book that really started everything for him was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which often people will consider one of his best books. For me, the second book in his series is CASHFLOW QUADRANT, which is a very, very important book. It talks a lot about the mindset of shifting your thinking from being, from an self-employed quadrant where you're working really, really, really hard to instead moving to a situation where you're working smarter and having money work for you, or having resources and tools and things work for you so that you can do more with less, ultimately speaking. Anyway, really good stuff. So today we're going to be doing a bit of a clip and we're going to talk about that. Kiyosaki's got some other books where he's talked about a coming crash, a looming crash, and concerns based on the economy. And so he touches on that briefly in this clip, and we're going to dive into a little bit of that, how infinite banking as a concept can help you potentially in mitigating that eventual problem that's going to come up. And, so we're going to discuss that a little bit. And also we're going to tie into a couple other key things. So let's go ahead and just get into it. And I'm going to let Robert take it away here in this great interview. By the way, shout out and thank you to the London Reel, who is the YouTube channel that you can find us on. We'll put some stuff in the links below where you can access the full interview. It's a 2-part series, really good interview, a lot of great takeaways in there, a lot of good quotes, and I would really encourage everyone to watch the full thing. We're just going to do a highlighted clip of it here today.
Well, that's what I was getting at. So Fuller talked about the generalized principles. One generalized principle is emergence through emergency. So when you look at the word emergency, the base word is emerge. And what Fuller says, the only way humans evolve is via emergency.
Crisis.
And a big one's coming. And it's going to be, as we all know, our banks have ripped us off immensely. They're just a bunch of crooks. I don't know how they can live with themselves. But, the bankers rip off trillions and they get bonused in billions. Nobody goes to jail. That's the sickness of our society. It's almost like self-defense. It's almost like taking judo against our own government and our own banking systems and Wall Street. So that's why we're here with Jim Rickards and Nomi. It's kind of self-defense, teaching people what schools will not teach us.
Okay. Oh, that's a very good little clip. So a couple of key takeaways here, some things that I wrote down. So first of all, he mentioned Buckminster Fuller. And if you're not familiar, Buckminster Fuller was an inventor. He served during World War I, spent some time in Canada. He worked in the meatpacking industry, kind of did a little bit of everything. He was even the president of Mensa for a number of years. And he had 28 patents, which is pretty astonishing. I mean, I don't know if you know anyone who's got some patents or whatever, but 28, that's a lot. The thing that he was kind of most known for, most notable when people think about, his accomplishments, was the invention of the geodesic dome and the structure around that. So, but he has some really, really powerful quotes. Now, a couple that I found that are some of my favorites is this one. And this actually, I didn't, find this directly myself. It was actually one of my colleagues who is a big fan of Buckminster Fuller, and he uses this regularly when he talks to people about the idea and the concept of implementing privatized banking. And the quote goes like this: if you want to teach people a new way of thinking, don't bother trying to teach them. Instead, give them a tool, the use of which will lead to new ways of thinking. One of the reasons I love this quote so much is because it really, when we implement the process, or people choose to go down the road of implementing the infinite banking concept, and we utilize the tool that is there to help facilitate that process, by using the tool, and the keyword is using it, it starts to spark new ideas in your head, and it allows you to problem solve differently. It allows you to come up with new ways of doing things, new processes that you hadn't seen there before. And we see it consistently with our clients who actually actively engage in the process of becoming their own banker. You become open to a whole new world of financial discovery just by the act of getting started and committing to that process. It's a psychological advantage that is just really interesting to see, watch, and be a part of. So I really love that quote. Another good quote that I like of Buckminster's is, "There is nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly." Okay, Richard, well, that's like a real cool quote, but what does that have to do with money and the crisis? Well, the reason I mention that is because often when we're talking about the infinite banking concept, which I believe is one of the core things that's going to allow people to weather the storm of whatever the coming crisis is. A crisis is always looming. There's always another one around the corner. The history of cycles is pretty clear. You can go back and look at the last 100 years and see all the recessions and things that we've had to experience, especially when you understand the business cycle that's discussed by the Austrian School of Economics. But when, this idea of a caterpillar, well, insurance, and specifically whole life insurance, is kind of like the caterpillar. It's that thing that's just kind of, oh, geez, that's kind of ugly, But if you actually understand what it does and how to use it, that it's actually a personal monetary system that is a private contract, a free contract between you and other free people that you're voluntarily choosing to be a part of in a mutually beneficial pool of participating ownership, then really it's the butterfly of the financial world, but nobody sees it that way because they just don't understand how to use it and really how to implement it as a core capital storage facility for your life that is safe and protected, always growing, and you can utilize it to accomplish other objectives. So really, really important. I think that's a good quote that identifies how the infinite banking concept, IBC, and the tool that we use to support implementation of that concept are so, it's really, on the surface, it might be kind of ugly if you don't know what it is, or you hear the words insurance. A lot of people just turn their brain off and just stop listening at that point, which is disappointing and unfortunate, because the reality is, if you're not open to learning something new, then, well, what are you doing on YouTube in the first place, to be honest with you? Anyhow, so I really think that that's a good example. So then a quote that comes up for me, thinking about what, Robert kind of talked about here in the banks and how they've been ripping people off. And, again, this is circling back to the 2008 financial crisis, and it goes much deeper than that, much farther down the rabbit hole than that. But he has a great quote, which has always been one of my favorites. And I think it's perfectly synonymous with how we need to start thinking about our financial life, our money, and our control over it personally at the you and me level. All right. So the quote is, "It's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep, how hard that money works for you, and how many generations do you keep it for." That is a powerful statement. Now, the thing is, when we're relying on the commercial or the investment banking sector to do that for us, these sectors are designed, they're not good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, you may not like banks and distrust them, so you may consider them to be bad, but that's a personal opinion. But ultimately, what we're talking about is organizations, and the general theme of them is to separate you from your money. Here's you and your money, and they're trying to pull things apart, and they want you to get regular contributions and deposits and put them into places and locations where it's really hard for you to get at them again. Whereas the process of becoming your own banker and implementing the infinite banking concept is about bringing you closer to your money. It's about making that connection so that you're in the driver's seat of things. And it's doing it inside of a vehicle that is participating with other free people by way of mutual whole life insurance inside of the general fund of an insurance company, where they cannot fractionalize the money supply. So the commercial banking system in North America allows you to fractionalize, or not allows you, but allows them to fractionalize the money supply. Basically, they only need to keep a fraction of the money on reserve that they have on deposit. The thing is, they don't manufacture or create the new money unless there's a demand to go in and access their money. Well, that's when we go in and request a loan. We want to go do a renovation on our house, we need a loan. We want to go buy a car, we need a loan. We want to go get a mortgage, we need a loan. It's at those points when we're requesting that money that the money kind of comes into being. And so by default, what happens is, as the consumers, through the mechanism by which they're able to make that adjustment, we're the ones that are actually increasing the money supply and driving up the inflation that can be the circumstance of that. So if you're able to move your dollars both on deposit and move your dollars that you would use for funding things or financing things, big ticket items and expenses and major purchases in your life, which you're going to do anyway. And we move those over to an environment, an institution, an organization that you mutually benefit in, where they cannot manipulate that money supply, and they're not manufacturing fictitious money by the purpose of doing it. Then you're automatically becoming part of what Nelson Nash, my mentor, would say is the solution versus the problem. So, talking about what Kiyosaki's gone over here in this little clip, again, a lot of people are very frustrated. I know I was, back in 2008 when the financial crisis hit, and that's exactly what happened. The governments bailed everybody out. They used money that doesn't really exist. They put an IOU basically on the back end of the backs of the taxpayers for the rest of time that needs to be paid back eventually with some kind of monetary value. And yet the money that was received by these banks, they didn't put restrictions on it. And so all the, people got bonuses for, basically failing the population. It's really irritating. It sucks. Like, that just shouldn't happen. And I don't think enough people went to jail for shenanigans that were being caused in that situation. And it's really concerning. So the likelihood is that, we've had a big bull run in the stock market and other things like that. And so when things hit a crash, everyone's sad and they're all upset about it. And, we're licking our wounds. But then, okay, things are trucking along again. Fake money's being pumped into the system. Things seem to be going forward. And at some point in time, that bubble that's being created has to burst. And then everyone's going to be sad, frustrated, angry, concerned, probably wondering where their money is. If you've ever had an experience where you've been sitting there and you're just like, feel like you got hit by a Mack truck and you're just dumbfounded because you're like, where did the money go? Where's my money? Like, don't put yourself in that position again. Find ways where you directly can control and have more insight and education and direct access to the liquidity and the usage of your own capital. All right. Understand where your capital can be safe, protected, and growing, but have liquidity for opportunities, because anytime that there's a cycle shift, that's when the largest opportunities are abound. They're all over the place. So when you have a readily available access to capital, which is something that by implementing the infinite banking concept, most people will have, unless they've been using it frivolously, then you are in a position to capitalize or to take advantage of these opportunities that will surely appear. And so I would have to defer to Robert Kiyosaki in that I also believe that a crisis is coming. Whether you believe it or not is your call, and do some of your own research. But there is always a cycle. And what we don't know is how big is the boom and how big is the bust. Is it going to be a 2008 size one? Is it going to be a Great Depression size one? What are we looking at that's around the corner? Is it going to be Black Monday from 1987 when the stock market got hit? Is it going to be the crash in 1929? Is it going to be the impact that we saw in the tech bubble? What is going to happen, and how are you positioned with the protection of your money so that you can weather the storm and you can separate yourself from some of that damage and be positioned to actually be profitable and to try and create things that create cash flow and so forth. Another thing I want to mention about this video, so I would encourage everyone to go back and watch the full clip. I think the whole first part is about 41 minutes, and then there's a part 2 from the London Reel on their YouTube channel. But at the 15-minute mark of this same, not this clip, but of the same full segment of the video, it's part 1, Robert mentioned something that his rich dad taught him and instilled in him early on. And I thought it was so powerful. They were in discussion in the interview about living by paycheck versus trying to create something bigger than that by your own steam, by putting that extra effort in. And something his rich dad said was, as long as you are hungry, you will think. Complacency is one of the biggest problems that I think is keeping people with an underfunded retirement account. When you get comfortable and you get complacent about something, it's not until you use that word emergency. It's not until you're in that emergency or crisis where you have to figure a way out. You got to problem solve. You got to outthink the situation that you're in. That's where we've heard the expression that necessity is the mother of all invention. Well, if you have a necessity to make sure you have a well-funded passive income or retirement account in order to survive long term, to live a fruitful and joyous life, then you need to be aware of that necessity, and you need to actively be investing in yourself and your own education to keep amplifying and growing and growing and growing so that you can make that result happen. When you get too comfortable, sometimes we get restrictions on there, and those restrictions are placed inside of this. And once that restriction is there, it's hard to outthink beyond it. So as long as you are hungry, you will think. And that's perfectly in alignment with the stuff that my mentor, Arnold Nash, who developed and created the infinite banking concept and wrote the best-selling book, Becoming Your Own Banker. Make sure you take a look in the links below. You can get a copy of that book. It's amazing. But he said it's all about how you think. It's all about how you think. You see, it's all about how you think. And he would start every single live session, live talk that he did, every seminar that he delivered with saying that sentence 3 times over in that way, because he wanted to emphasize the things that mattered and to get you to really be aware. And one of his favorite words was the word ruminate, which means basically to think about your thinking. So when you take time to deliberate and actually consider thinking about what's going on in your financial life, thinking about what's going on in the financial world, thinking about how much control you have over it. There's a lot of things that we just don't have control over. We don't have control over the next Canadian national election or the American election. We don't get to vote in that country unless you're maybe a dual citizen or whatever. So if you're not aware of, or you can't control those things, you don't know how the winds of change are going to shift to impact you. It could impact your business directly. It could be the thing that puts you out of business. It could be what increases taxes, let's say, and then that erodes the value of your money. So these are things you need to be aware of and understand. You can take more control, recognize that there is a crisis. It is going to happen. The cycle will shift. Things will turn bad overall in the economy. How are you positioned to be in the best possible light, to profit, to maximize, and to grow, and to make sure your money and your capital is protected? Hope you enjoyed this. Make sure to check out our other videos. Thanks for listening in, and have yourself an amazing financial life.